This is Peter Parker from Earth 123, and early on in his senior year of high school he was bit by a spider that turned out to alter his DNA and give him superpowers. And it wasn't long after that where Peter would become Spider-Man. And for a while everything was amazing to Peter as he spent a lot of time defending the streets of New York. Until one day, Peter was walking home from the store when he saw that his Uncle Ben got shot. And it turns out that Uncle Ben, who just so happened to be a really big college football fan, well, he had some final words to say to Peter. Win a Heisman, Peter. And from there, Peter Parker knew exactly what he had to do. So today I am putting Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, into College Football 26. Let's see if Peter can become a great football player and potentially win a Heisman, as we follow him on his road to glory. Now all throughout high school, Peter had never played a single snap of football. And one day when he was hanging out with some girls, someone threw a football at him, and he snagged it like he was Odell or something, man. He threw it right back and broke the goalpost. So yeah, them boys wanted him on the squad, and soon Peter was a member of the Midtown High football team. And he could not wait to get into the first game of his career, and he was looking forward to showing some coaches around the country that he had potential to play at the next level. Now since Peter had never really played a lot of football, they didn't put him in until the second quarter. But when he did get in, unfortunately he didn't do what he was supposed to do and caused his quarterback to throw a pick. So definitely a rough start for Peter, but they brought him back out here during the 2-minute drill, and it looks like Peter Parker's starting to get some things going. Okay, Peter. He was showing that he had ability to play from the slot and the outside, making a play that helped his team get across the 50 in the third quarter, and eventually down to the goal line where Peter got himself open and came up with his first touchdown of his high school career. Peter was already catching eyes from recruits as he was playing in one of the best divisions in New York City. And by the end of this game, after his team was able to come up with a win, Peter Parker was now a 2-star recruit. And he is already beginning to get some scholarships from programs that are nearby. That's exactly what Peter's looking for, as he definitely wants to stay close to home. But that's something he can worry about later, as he has to stay locked in on his high school career. And after Peter had a great game in the previous week, the coaches have now decided to start him, and he is already coming up with some nice catches. He helped Midtown High get down to the goal line where he was able to come up with a touchdown. He was already becoming a factor for his team, as he was pretty much catching everything. And he was coming up with some spectacular plays while he was at it. Peter Parker was showing that he could be a dominant receiver, and that's exactly why he was now a 3-star recruit. He was getting a lot of love from coaches in the area as he was thinking about signing with Syracuse. So things are definitely going well for Peter right now, but it turns out one of Peter's teammates are not happy that he's taking his shot. So he was going to go ahead and try to punch Peter in the face, but Peter dodged that right there. Oh yeah, see, Peter did not want to hurt him. But after his teammate tried to hit him with a 4-piece combo, yeah, see, that wasn't going to fly with Peter. So Peter just decided to grab his wrist and hit him with that boy, get out of here, boy. Peter was taking care of business off the field, and he was definitely taking care of it on it. In his next game, he came up with the first down for his team before he said, hey, helping to put them in scoring range. And this was definitely a game where Peter was beginning to show that he could become one of the best receivers in the nation, as he is somehow able to run through this entire defense for a touchdown, putting up a score that would now officially make him a 4-star recruit. Peter Parker was really working his way up for Uncle Ben, man. He was locked in. And don't y'all forget, man, he is doing all this while still making time to be Spider-Man. But after taking a look at his recruiting board, Peter's just trying to figure out what college he wants to go to, because now it is time for him to head into his final game of his high school career, where it will be his last chance to make some plays and earn his way to the next level. Now, it was not long into this game where Peter would say, "Mwang," coming up with an easy pitch and catch for a touchdown that puts his team up by 2 possessions in the first quarter. And this turned out to be another great game for Peter, as he would catch his second touchdown in the second quarter. He had his team up by 2 possessions before his opponent would make a comeback. So with less than a minute left in this game, Midtown High needed somebody to make a play. And it turned out that it would be Peter's teammate, Miles Morales. He comes up with a huge play that gets Midtown High in the end zone for 6, giving Midtown High the win and officially making Peter Parker a 5-star recruit. Within just a few weeks, Peter went from an actual nobody to one of the top recruits in the entire nation. But now that it was time for him to make his college decision soon, he had some equipmental ability, but he decided to just stick with his spidey senses, man. He was going to be fine with that. But now it is officially time for Peter Parker to make his college decision. And his top 3 choices would actually be SMU, Rutgers, and Syracuse. And after officially deciding that he was not going to SMU, Peter would ultimately decide to sign with Rutgers. Now, as soon as he got to Rutgers, it turns out that they did not have his number 2, but he did end up liking the number 15, so he decided to stick with that. And it was actually around this time where Peter would find out that his friend Mary Jane would also be going to Rutgers. She actually wanted to hang out and explore the campus together, which Peter thought would be nice because he always had a crush on her. So Peter was definitely looking forward to that, but he was not looking forward to interacting with his head coach. Because it turns out that even though Peter was a 5-star recruit, he would be riding the bench this season, which obviously Peter was not happy about, but he accepted it and was ready to lock in and just try to get to work at practice. Peter was actually doing a great job showing the coaches what he can do during fall camp, but Peter was also doing a great job showing that he cared about saving this city. And since Rutgers was only about a 20-minute swing away, he had to spend some time as Spider-Man before he got into the regular season. And oh yeah, he sees somebody right there, hold on. Oh yeah, what's up bitches, Spider-Man here. You see, Peter could not spend too much time on these dudes because he had to get back to college. So he started webbing them up and sent this one dude's jaw to the moon before slamming him down, and he was able to make it back in time for some practice. And it would actually take up until the season started for the coaches to see that Peter was a lot more athletic than they thought. So they decided that they would actually give him some reps going into the first game of the year, where Rutgers would now be on the road facing off against Boston College. Now Peter would actually make his debut here in the first quarter, where he had a nice release off the line to get himself open and come up with a great catch. That boy Peter snagged that ball at the air with one hand. He made a play that had the coaches trusting him to be out there on 3rd and 9. Where it turned out to be Peter who not only came up with the catch but brought them deep into scoring range. Now unfortunately Coach Jameson would take him out and would not put him back in until the 4th quarter. And Peter had actually done a great job making a play that got his team back into field goal range, helping them take the lead before Boston College would go downfield and take it right back. Bringing us to first down with 12 seconds left, or at least they thought it was 12 seconds left because Boston College was cheating. Them boys took a page out of the Patriots playbook and ran the clock all the way down, so after Peter comes up with this catch that brings his team across midfield, it was already too little too late, as Rutgers would go on to lose the first game of the year. Dropping this one by 1 point, but Peter felt pretty good about how he played. 4 receptions for 67 yards is pretty good for his first game. So going into next week, he felt confident asking head coach J. Jonah Jameson if it was possible that he can get the ball more.
Are you serious?
Now Coach Jameson did laugh in Peter Parker's face, but that was before he realized that they were about to play against one of the worst teams in the country. And it would be a perfect opportunity to develop some of his young talent, including Parker, as Rutgers was heading into the first home game of the year, where they will be matched up against FCS East. Now once again early on in the first quarter, they put Peter Parker out there in the game, and on his very first play, he decided to say, "Mwanga!" He snagged this ball at the air for 42 yards, coming up with the play that he thought impressed the coaches, but they actually take him out. They did bring him back in when FCS East was actually winning this game, and Peter was out here helping the team pick up some more first downs. Almost every single time that they threw to Peter, he was snagging the ball at the air even with one hand. And eventually by the 3rd quarter, when his team was still down in this game, he came up with a catch that not only gave his team a first down, but also put him over 100 yards on the day for the first time in his career. But Peter knew with his team still down and him still being in the game, that he had to try and make something happen to help his team come up with a win. So after getting past all the DBs on this play, Peter was able to get over the top and say, "Mwanga!" snagging this ball at the air with one hand for his first touchdown of his college football career. Oh yeah, Peter Parker showing that he different. He came out here on the very next drive and continued to show that he can get past his defense and come up with another one-handed catch. Peter Parker was making some immaculate plays, doing just enough to help his team come up with a 16-7 W. And Rutgers can thank their true freshman Peter Parker, who went for 199 receiving yards off of 6 receptions. He had a spectacular game, and he couldn't help but feel like this is what he'll need to keep doing if he ever wants to live up to Uncle Ben's final wishes. Now on top of things going really well for Peter in football, he was also now dating Mary Jane. And as far as being Spider-Man at the moment, things were going pretty well. He was actually in the process of figuring out if he wanted to upgrade to a new suit, which made him realize that maybe he should upgrade some of his gear on the football field. He felt good about how he had been playing on the field, and he wanted to start looking good too. So going into his next game, Peter Parker was completely locked in with his new look, and he was ready to help his team try and come up with their second win of the season. Now, since Peter had a spectacular game last week, they're giving him the ball a lot in this one. And one thing for sure is that Peter is definitely not disappointing, because by the 3rd quarter, he would already have 4 receptions, and his 5th one would be a one-hander. He came up with a play that helped his team get into scoring range and maintain their lead in the 4th quarter, where even though Peter actually comes up with the catch for a first down, he gets taken out the game and is brought back in with his team down. Rutgers has to find a way to come up with a touchdown with less than 30 seconds left, but Peter's doing a great job giving them a chance. But at this point, with around 10 seconds left, Spider-Man knows that his team needs somebody to make a play. But it turns out that his spider senses were tingling, because he knew that he would be able to get open on this play and come up with a catch for a touchdown. Peter Parker is coming up with the score with less than 10 seconds left, making a massive play that not only gives his team the lead, but gives them their second win of the season. Rutgers is able to close this one out 20-17. And it looks like Coach Jameson had changed his tune about Peter getting some receptions, as he finished this one with 144 yards and 9 catches. He was becoming a focal point of this offense, and ultimately the coaching staff decided that they would give him a chance to move up to wide receiver 1. Peter Parker had been an extremely important player for Rutgers so far throughout the season, and he continued to show exactly why all throughout practice. The coaches realized that he had some serious potential to become one of the top receivers in the nation. So eventually they would make the decision to officially move him up, and they cannot wait to see what he can do heading into the next game of the season, where it looks like Rutgers is heading on the road to face off against 3-0 Northwestern. Now, Peter was playing well early on in this one, but unfortunately he was not able to catch everything. And against a team that had been playing well all throughout the season, Northwestern definitely had Rutgers' number, at least throughout the majority of this first half, until Peter would start coming up with some big catches that moved the team into field goal range. Eventually they were able to get down to the goal line with less than 15 seconds left, where Peter had run a Spencer James-ass route and came up with a touchdown. A big play that puts his team up and actually gives them some momentum going into the second half. And now that Rutgers is playing with a lead, Peter has no problem coming out here and saying, "Wang," snagging his ball over 2 defenders and moving his team past midfield. Peter was continuing to come up with some plays that helped his team move all the way down to the 1-yard line, where on first down the running back was able to get in the end zone for a score. And from there, Rutgers pretty much had all the momentum, as Peter continued to fry up his defense, as he not only came up with his second touchdown, but by the end of the third quarter, he was now coming up with his third. Peter Parker was having his best day so far of his college football career, and it was because of him that his team would go on to blow out Northwestern, just dominating them 31-13 thanks to an 150-yard performance and 3 touchdowns from Peter Parker. A big day from the true freshman, but it was actually only going to get bigger, because it turns out that his best friend Harry was going to set him up with a research lab at Oscorp. And because Peter's best friend's dad actually owned the company, Peter would now have a chance to get some work done and do some research in his spare time. But that is definitely going to have to wait, as for now he is locked in on football. And his team's definitely going to need him to be, as he is heading into one of the toughest games on the schedule. Because although Rutgers will be at home, they have to face off against a top 25 ranked team, as they're set to match up against fake-ass Patrick Mahomes and Nebraska. Now, Peter Parker would get this game started out hot. He came up with a reception before saying, "Hey," and out of nowhere, Peter was breaking loose. He was outrunning most of these defenders, but he could not outrun the last guy, and he gets stopped in field goal range, ultimately setting his teammate up with a chance to punch this one across for a score. Taking the lead in the first quarter, and things are looking good for Rutgers after they get the ball back. And back down at the goal line, they came up with another touchdown that put them up by 14. So right now, they're actually in excellent position as they still have the lead before half. But after Peter Parker makes an incredible catch, snagging his ball out the air and putting his team back into field goal range, Rutgers now had a chance to extend their lead, which they eventually did with the touchdown. Rutgers had complete control of this game, and they would maintain it until the fourth quarter, where after this play, when Peter runs the post and snags this ball, he comes up with a touchdown that puts Rutgers back up by 2 possessions and does enough to put this game away. Rutgers was taking down one of the top teams in the country 28-21, largely thanks to their true freshman Peter Parker, who had another 100-yard game. Peter had been taking care of business all season on the field, and one day when he went to take care of business off the field, he realized that he is right by his high school field. It hasn't even been a year and he is already missing Midtown, man. But Peter was a little bummed out though, because they would actually redesign this field and he never got a chance to play on it. But Peter is glad that he gets to play on his new field in New Jersey, especially heading into the next week as Rutgers is facing off against another top 25 team in the nation. They will have a chance to prove that they can keep matching up against some of the best squads in the country, as Rutgers is now taking on number 22, USC. Now, Peter started this game off playing pretty much just as well as he had all season, coming up with a play that helped his team get down to the goal line, where shortly after another player would take advantage with a touchdown, helping his team come up with a score that gave him a 7-0 lead, and Rutgers was just trying to keep the momentum going from there. They came to a 2nd down and 6 where they sent Peter in a little motion and got the ball to him quickly on the inside, and from there Peter looked like he was ready to make a play, man. He is out here making people miss. He stiff arms 2 people back to back before deciding to jump over another guy, and oh wow, Peter Parker is gone. He is just barely outrunning this big-ass defender. Is that the Rhino? Either way, Peter is able to get to the end zone, and he comes up with easily the best play of his season so far. Peter damn near almost revealed that he was Spider-Man on that play. So going forward throughout this one, he knew he had to tone it down a bit and come up with some normal plays that could still help his team, like this deep reception downfield. At some point, Peter got to 200 yards on the day, and with the chance to close out this game, he was looking to add to it by coming up with this reception before jumping over another player. Peter Parker had completely taken over this game, and that's exactly why the Scarlet Knights would go on to dominate the Trojans, closing this one out 38-14, and shout out to Peter Parker, who had another one of his best performances of the season, and because of him, his team was on a 5-game win streak. Regardless, Peter still gave credit to his teammates when asked about the team's success, but Peter knew that this was only the beginning because soon, he would have to lock back in for another huge game, as this one was by far going to be the toughest game of the year, with Rutgers now heading on the road to face off against number 13th ranked Penn State. Now, Peter already had 50 yards receiving in this game by the second quarter, and he was adding to it with a huge one-handed reception. He was coming up with a play that he really hoped would set the tone for his team, because going forward, they were pretty much force-feeding Peter the ball. By the end of the second quarter, he already had 15 receptions and 121 yards, helping his team get down to the goal line where they came up with a score to tie this game up at 7. But Peter's impact in this game would only continue as he was coming up with his 19th reception and breaking multiple tackles to pick up a first down. And on the very next play, Peter came up with his 20th reception. I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure that's got to break some sort of record. But that don't really matter right now because Peter's trying to build upon it with his 21st. But the quarterback throws a pick, and this DB is actually able to take it all the way to the crib for a touchdown, giving Penn State the lead, and now they have all the momentum on their side. Now, Peter did come back out here and continue to catch anything that came his way, helping his team get down to the goal line with a chance to put up some points, but unfortunately Peter could not catch everything, as the quarterback throws another pick, and all of a sudden Rutgers is now down by 2 possessions. So at this point, Peter knows that he has to lock in, and he's got to try to find a way to get his team back in the scoring range, which he does after he comes up with a great reception here in the fourth quarter. He has 28 receptions for over 300 yards, and after his team was able to come out here and put up a touchdown, somehow with all those touches, Peter was not a player who was able to get in the end zone, and it's too bad that he would never get the chance, because Penn State would take down Rutgers 17-14. Rutgers takes their second loss of the season despite Peter having one of, if not the greatest game in the history of college football for a receiver. He had absolutely dominated and only had 3 drops out of 28 receptions. Despite the loss though, Peter did go on to break quite a few records and earn himself his first National Offensive Player of the Week. So he did still feel pretty good about himself. Well, that was until he found out that his girlfriend Mary Jane was cheating on him with his best friend Harry. Oh, nah, that made Peter sick. He just wanted to lay down and try and forget about all of this, but little did he know that something was about to take over, and things were about to change for Spider-Man. Oh shit. Spider-Man got infected by a symbiote, giving him a black suit. And now Spider-Man is angry, man. He came out here and broke a metal pipe on this dude's head before punching this dude's jaw to the moon and snapping his neck on the ground, bro. Yeah, Peter not playing around. Oh yeah, something is definitely different with Peter at this point. He is feeling angry. But since he actually liked this black suit, he convinced his coaches to let them wear black jerseys in the next game, as now Rutgers was looking to get back on track heading into their next matchup against Indiana. Now this one was turning out to be another game where they were giving the ball to Peter as much as possible. He was pretty much demanding the ball, and by the end of the first half, he would come up with a touchdown, putting his team up by a possession as they head into the third quarter. But by the fourth quarter, Indiana was taking that lead right back. So on this third down, Peter knew that he had to come up with a play to try and help his team, so he decided to say, "Mwang," coming up with a catch and breaking off a tackle that brings his team in the red zone, where they now had a chance to tie this game up. But it turns out that Peter had different plans as he came up with his 17th reception and his second touchdown of the day, putting up a score for the Scarlet Knights in the final minutes of this game and helping Rutgers come out with a 24-17 W. They get back on track thanks to their freshman who went for another 200-yard day. Peter Parker was absolutely on fire in the second half of the season, and he definitely had no plans of slowing down as he was heading on the road to face off against Cincinnati, where in this one Peter was once again frying these DBs all throughout the first half. He already had over 100 yards on the day, and by the time he came up with his 6th reception, it would be for a touchdown. a score that gave his team the lead heading into the second half before Cincinnati would take it right back. But even in a game where Peter was being double-teamed, he would still come up with one-handed catches over defenders, setting his tone for his team as by the fourth quarter they were down inside the red zone, and after Peter does a great job taking advantage of all the space on the outside, he's able to break off a tackle and jump over a defender in the end zone. Peter Parker comes up with another incredible play that is leading his team to another win on the season. Peter Parker almost has back-to-back 200-yard games, but he does have another game that leads to him breaking another record for Rutgers. So at this point, things were looking great for Peter Parker. But little did he know that behind the scenes, something was happening with Norman Osborn that would affect his life in the near future. But at the moment, Peter was just trying to get used to the fact that his head coach seemed to like him now. I mean, it's kind of hard not to when your true freshman was this good this early. And he had absolutely no fear heading on the road into another game where Rutgers would face off against 2-7 Wisconsin. Now at this point, Peter was still carrying that Venom symbiote, so he was looking pretty strong in this one, man. He was out here breaking out tackles and came up with an easy touchdown here in the first quarter. He set the tone for his team in what turned out to be another win for the Scarlet Knights, taking down Wisconsin as they moved to 8-2 on the season. And before Peter even realized, Rutgers was now ranked the 15th team in the country. They had definitely come a long way from being one of the lowest ranked teams in the nation. Absolutely nobody expected them to be good this year until they got a 5-star recruit, but even then, people still don't expect them to be competitive in their next game, as now Rutgers was officially heading into the biggest game of the year. This game was giving them a chance to not only move into the top 10 teams in the country, but they would also have an opportunity to take down the #1 team in the nation, as Rutgers will be at home to face off against the Michigan Wolverines. Now Michigan would take the lead here early on, going up 7-0, but Peter was doing an excellent job here, especially in his first half, as he already had 5 receptions and was going for his 6th to put his team inside the red zone, bringing us to a second down and 10 where Peter ran a great route that gave him leverage, and he got open for an easy touchdown to tie this game up. And after starting to play football not even a year ago, Peter almost can't even believe that he is doing this against the best team in the country at the highest level. But as Michigan takes the lead in the second half and his offense begins to struggle, Peter doesn't have such a hard time believing it anymore, especially after Michigan finds a way to go up 21-10. So Peter has to come out here and make some big plays to get his team back across field. Eventually bringing us to the fourth quarter, we're on 3rd down and goal. Peter comes up with his 2nd touchdown of the day. He brought his team back in this one with the chance to potentially tie this one up or even take the lead. But that was until Michigan extended their lead to 2 possessions. And now with around a minute left, this is starting to seem like a game that's going to be tough to come back from. But after, without calling for the ball, the quarterback threw a pick. That would pretty much wipe away all of Rutgers' hopes and dreams for this season, as they would end up taking their 3rd loss of the season to the #1 team in the nation, dropping this one 24-14 in a game that pretty much removes any chance for Rutgers to make the college football playoffs. At this point in the season though, Peter Parker has almost 2,000 yards receiving. So regardless of the fact that his team might not be in the postseason, Peter was actually feeling pretty good. He wanted to become a great football player and win an award for his Uncle Ben. But unfortunately, he might only get a couple more chances to do so heading into the final game of the regular season, with Rutgers now heading on the road to face off against 4-7 Maryland. Now no surprise, early on in this one, Peter was playing well, but he was doing it in different ways as he freed up one of his teammates and got them wide open in the end zone for a score. He had Rutgers going up 7 in this one early, and he was hoping that they would never look back. By the second quarter, they still had that 7-point lead, and Peter was doing a great job looking to add to it as he came up with a big reception that puts him over 100 yards. And in a game where Peter was out here drawing a lot of attention, he was once again able to free up one of his teammates for another touchdown. Rutgers is scoring points that puts him up by 2 possessions heading into the second half, bringing us to the end of the third quarter where Maryland is trying to do their best to bracket Peter Parker. But it is not working out for them as Peter snags his ball over a defender, coming up with his first score of the day that puts his team back up by 2 possessions. Now leading us here to the fourth, where Rutgers has a chance to put this one away with a couple more first downs, bringing us to 3rd down and 6 where Peter got himself open to the outside, and Peter goes up and snags this one, barely getting 1 foot in bounds. He makes a play that keeps the chains moving and helps the Scarlet Knights come up with their 9th victory of the season. They close out the regular season with one of their best records in program history, and the entire team knows that it could not have been done without Peter Parker. But unfortunately, with the team currently sitting as the number 21st ranked team in the nation, it looks like they will not be able to make the college football playoffs. So not necessarily the way the team wanted to end the year, but at the very least, Peter Parker did go on to break a lot of records this season. He played so well that he actually ended up earning himself the Walter Camp Award, as he had a season with over 2,000 yards, 130 receptions, and 15 touchdowns. Peter Parker had absolutely balled out, as he not only earned himself the Shaun Alexander and the Maxwell Award, but he would also earn himself the Heisman Trophy, the first one to ever do so in the history of Rutgers, and the first ever true freshman to ever win it in the history of college football. Peter Parker had already established himself as one of the greatest receivers in the history of the game, and as he saw that he was winning a bunch of other awards, he couldn't help but think about his Uncle Ben, and he was reminded of something that he had once been told.
With great power comes great responsibility.
And just like that, Peter started to realize that although this black suit made him feel powerful, it also made him feel very angry. For now though, he was just going to deal with it as he was heading into the final game of the season. And he was still hoping the black suit would help him in this one, as he was trying to come up with the win in the final game of the year, with Rutgers getting set to face off against the Texas Longhorns. Now Texas had the early 7-0 lead in this one, and even though Peter was doing a great job of getting open, his quarterback was throwing some crazy passes that resulted in Peter getting flagged for an offensive pass interference. So that pretty much puts an end to their opening possession, and it wouldn't be until another third down in the second quarter where Peter would finally come up with his first reception of the day. He was going to try and help his team get downfield and put up some points until his quarterback threw a pick. Yeah, Peter has no idea what's going on with the quarterback this game, but he is playing garbage. And all of a sudden, Texas is up 17-0, literally the biggest deficit that Rutgers has faced all season. So I'm not gonna lie, it's starting to feel like panic mode, but Peter Parker was not panicking. He comes up with a reception that brings him down the sideline and in the end zone for a score. Spider-Man makes a play to bring the team within 2 possessions, and then Texas would put it back to 3. So now Rutgers is back in a hole, but after Texas has a busted coverage, Peter Parker is heading back towards the end zone again, coming up with a score that gets his team within 2 possessions again as he tries to get the Scarlet Knights back in this game. Unfortunately, that Longhorns offense seems like it was not messing around, as they go back up by 3 possessions in the third quarter, and after a play where for some reason Peter doesn't even go for this catch, Rutgers is now forced to punt the ball again, and they are now down by multiple possessions. I don't know where Rutgers fell way behind in this one, but on the bright side, Peter was getting himself open and broke off a tackle for another score, coming up with a big play that gets his team on the board and at least makes this one closer, but at the end of the day, it was not enough. And this would officially be the end of Peter Parker's freshman season. They get blown out in this one 41-21, and instead of being angry about the loss, he just appreciated the fact that he had an incredible season, putting up over 2,200 yards and 18 touchdowns. He had led the entire nation. But in a season where he had played for one of the lowest level teams in the country, Peter was honestly contemplating hitting the transfer portal, and possibly head to a team that would have made his Uncle Ben even more proud by potentially winning a national championship. But before Peter could even think about doing that, man, he had to rip off this black suit. He had to get back to being himself again, and eventually he did. Spider-Man was back to protecting this city, and he was taking some time to think about his college future because he definitely had a big decision to make. Which brings us to today, where Peter Parker has some decisions to make on his college future. So after taking some time to think about it in the offseason, he realized that he did not have a very good team here at Rutgers, and preferably he'd like to be closer to home, so he decided that he was going to enter the transfer portal, where unfortunately there was only a couple options and none of them were amazing, but there was one that he felt like at least had a good enough team to be competitive. So ultimately for Peter Parker's sophomore season, he decided to sign with the Syracuse Orange. And now that Peter Parker is a member of the Orange, he has to pick a new number, but they do not have 15 and they don't have number 2. But Syracuse actually left a specific number open because they wanted him to wear number 1. It was fitting since he was the number 1 player in the country, and the Orange wanted him to feel right at home with his new team. But it turns out Syracuse would not be the only team Spider-Man was joining, because in the offseason he had met this guy named Tony Stark, who had allowed him to start working with the Avengers. Now, he wasn't a full-time team member quite yet, but one day he was going to get there. But as far as his football team, he was ready to be a leader, and he felt pretty good about the squad going into the season. I mean, they had a good running back, they had some fast receivers, and he knew that based on how the offense was moving at practice that they might have a chance to put up a lot of points this year. The only thing was that Peter was still going to have to find a way to balance football with being Spider-Man. His roommate wanted him to take his dog out to Central Park, so Peter had decided to get that done real quick, but it turns out that he had missed his team's plane, so dang man, Peter had to swing all the way out to his first game of the season, which happened to be on the road against one of the best teams in the Big Ten, the Penn State Nittany Lions. Now on his first play as a member of Syracuse, Peter Parker had decided to say, "Mwah." The Heisman Trophy winner Peter Parker was getting this season started hot, and it turns out that this catch was only just the beginning. Because at this point in the first quarter, Peter already has 4 catches for 50 yards, and his 5th one would go for a touchdown. He was making a statement here on Syracuse's opening drive of the season. The only question is, would the team be able to maintain this momentum on the road? And the answer for now is no, because they would find themselves down by 7 by the time the second quarter came around. And speaking of quarters, their quarterback would throw a pick, one that got returned all the way to the house to put Penn State up by 2 possessions. Now, by the end of the second quarter, Peter was helping his team fight back as he scored a touchdown, his second one of the day, to get his team within a possession. And then he would come up with another catch that brought his team into field goal range, allowing the Orange to put this one at 17-21 before they went to half. Bringing us here to the third quarter, where Peter Parker was working himself open, and he came up with a catch. Peter Parker was outrunning this Penn State defense for a touchdown, his 3rd one of the day. And at this point, Peter is so hyped that he's out here showing off some of his Spiderman moves. Unfortunately, though, by the 4th quarter, Syracuse would find themselves back down. But it didn't seem like it would be like that for long after Peter Parker comes up with a catch, and he's breaking off tackles to bring his team into scoring range. They have a chance to go down the field and come up with a touchdown, but the quarterback throws a pick. And at this point, it seems like this game is definitely over, but somehow it ends up in overtime. And not only that, Penn State was only able to score a field goal, which means that all Peter Parker had to do was just come out here and make another catch for a score, and he would be helping his team come up with the win on the road in their first game of the season. Syracuse takes down Penn State in overtime, and this was actually one of the biggest upsets of the week. And a lot of people were praising the help of Peter Parker as he had a spectacular performance. He went on to break some records after he had 20 receptions, 386 yards, and 4 touchdowns. But if people thought that this was a good game from Peter, then yeah, he feels like he might have an even better performance in his next one, which will be his first game at home as a member of the Orange, where they are now set to face off against FCS Southeast. So, we are here in the first quarter of this game, and Peter Parker is already coming up with a touchdown. And it wasn't long after that he realized that this might be an extremely easy game, because he wasn't even out of the first quarter yet when he had over 100 yards and came up with his 2nd touchdown of the day. But if you thought he was done, then you'd be crazy, because by the end of the first half, he already had over 250 yards and now was getting his 3rd touchdown. I mean, it seems like the only time they can stop Peter is after he gets to the end zone, because he still wasn't even out of the first half yet when he got wide open up the seam and he was outrunning his defense for his 4th score of the half. Peter Parker already had 15 receptions, 300 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Yet he would still have a chance to add to it as Syracuse gets the ball again before half, and Peter gets his 5th touchdown of the day. He is frying these boys. Somebody send help. By the start of the second half, this game was pretty much already out of reach. But just in case it wasn't, Peter had to come out here and say, "Mwah." And even though Spider-Man is playing against one of the worst teams in all of college football, man, even he can't believe it. He is having a historical afternoon, one that would help his team come up with a dominant 49-10 victory. The Orange absolutely decimated their opponent, and it was definitely thanks to Peter Parker, New York's newest hero. He put up 21 receptions and 360 yards in a dominating win. He just casually has the best receiving game of all time, which had Peter in a pretty good mood. And that made it easier to forgive his best friend Harry for kissing his girlfriend, because Peter would find out that Norman Osborn would give Harry a goblin serum as he was trying to help Harry fight off a degenerative disease that he had. So unfortunately, Harry was still sick, but Peter was going to be there for him. And when he wasn't there for him, he would be locked in, ready to head into his next game. Peter Parker was back in New York for another game on the season, and he was ready to put up another big-time performance at home against Tulsa. Now, by the end of the first quarter, Peter would already have 5 receptions for 40 yards, but his 6th one would be a one-handed snag that he plucked out of the air for a touchdown. Peter Parker was starting this game off right as he helped his team tie it up at 7. But it wasn't just Peter out here making plays, because for the first time in his college career, he has some other players stepping up. As a receiver catches the touchdown that puts Syracuse up before they get the ball back before half, leading to a play where Peter's just trying to stretch the field, but his quarterback gives him a chance, and he snags this pass out the air. Peter Parker was dominating another game as he already had over 150 yards before half. But it didn't seem like Peter had any intentions of stopping as he got to the third quarter, and he would come up with another one-handed catch for a touchdown. Peter Parker was eviscerating this defense. And honestly, he was starting to get a little bit mad that they weren't giving him more of a challenge. It was all good though, man, because by the 4th quarter, Peter would catch another touchdown. And at this point, he wasn't even excited anymore, man. He was just happy that he helped his team secure another W. as they take care of Tulsa 35-10 thanks to a 245 receiving yard game from Peter. He was already winning his third National Offensive Player of the Week, and it looks like he could potentially run it back for another Heisman. He had more receiving yards than anybody else in the country, and the next closest guy had 300 less yards with 2 more games played. Yeah, Peter Parker was a problem for opposing defenses, but I can tell you guys right now, he is also a problem for anybody that's trying to cause problems in New York. Peter Parker had to take out some of these bad guys, and thanks to some new tech that Tony Stark had given him, he was having a lot of fun doing it. One thing that Peter certainly loved to do was protect this city, but he also loved playing for this city too. And he cannot wait to hop into his next game, as it would be another one at home, with Syracuse now set to face off against Pittsburgh. Now Peter has started off this game playing from the slot, and he had done a great job working across field and coming up with a reception that brings his team within the 20-yard line. But it wouldn't be long after where Peter would realize that he was playing against a much better team than he had faced the previous weeks. Because after his quarterback throws a pick, Syracuse is all of a sudden down by 14. And now at the end of half, Peter's going to have to find a way to help them get back in this game. And this catch right here is going to get them started. They have a great opportunity here to put up some points, and it seems like they have a nice little play going, but this receiver fumbles the ball, and Pittsburgh picks it up. Now thankfully this would not turn into any points for Pittsburgh, and Syracuse would score some points before the end of half, bringing us here to the second half where Peter would finally come up with a touchdown. He cuts this deficit down to 1 possession before Pittsburgh would extend it in the 4th quarter. And at this point, Peter's just trying to do everything he can to make a play, but he was trying too much, as him calling for the ball caused his quarterback to throw a pick, resulting in 23rd ranked Syracuse taking their first loss of the season. The Orange dropped to 3-1 on the year, even with another great performance from Peter Parker. I mean, they are only 4 games in, and Peter has already set the single season record for touchdowns at Syracuse. He couldn't really be playing much better after he earns another Offensive Player of the Week, but he knew there was definitely some things that he could be working on, including getting himself a new Spidey suit. He wanted something that resembled a little bit closer to his team's colors, just so he could feel a little bit more like Spider-Man when he was on the field. And going forward throughout the year, he could not wait to show the country that Syracuse deserved to be back in the top 25, and that they had potential to compete for a national championship. Now, it wasn't long into this game's opening possession where Peter was making an impact by coming up with a one-handed snag on the sideline. Spider-Man was starting this game off right and setting the tone for his team, because by the 4th quarter, they stayed very close in this one. And when they needed it most, it was actually one of Peter's teammates who came up with the catch and brought the team all the way towards the goal line for a touchdown, putting up a score that would go on to help Syracuse win this game. Peter had another 100-plus yard day, and he was excited about getting his first NIL deal of the season.
Pizza time.
But Peter was also excited that Syracuse was back to being a top 25 ranked team, and they had a chance to continue to prove that they belong as they head on the road against Virginia Tech. Now Syracuse came out here in a game against a winless team firing on all cylinders. Peter Parker came up with a touchdown to set the tone for his team, and this seems like they got the message here in the 2nd quarter as their star running back comes up with a big play that brings the team across the goal line for a touchdown, putting them up by 2 possessions. Now by the 4th quarter they are only up by 8, but they have some plans to change that. They run a pop pass to Peter Parker before he breaks off a tackle, and now Peter has a bunch of room down the sideline. Peter just glides his way to the end zone to put his team up by 2 possessions in the 4th quarter, getting himself another touchdown on the season and his team another win on the year. Syracuse takes down an ACC opponent 21-6. And at this point, with Syracuse on a roll, Peter feels great going forward throughout the year. But it turns out he wasn't the only one feeling great, because his best friend Harry was doing a lot better. He told Peter that his dad gave him some black substance that helped him completely heal. So Peter was definitely happy for his best friend Harry, but he was even more happy to get into his next game, where Syracuse was heading into another ACC battle on the road against Stanford. Now at this point in his career, no matter where Peter is lined up, he is always making an impact, and this game was no different. He came up with a touchdown at the end of half to put his team up by 1 possession, but this actually turned out to be a game where Peter did not have to do too much, because his teammates were showing up big against their conference opponent. A receiver came up with a touchdown to give Syracuse the lead back at the end of the 3rd, bringing us to the end of the 4th quarter where the Orange found themselves in field goal range, but their running back was coming up with a play just to make sure that they were in better position, ultimately resulting in Syracuse holding on for a 24-21 victory. In this game particularly, they can thank Tyshawn Russell, who went for over 100 yards and a touchdown. But over the course of the season, yeah buddy, New York has been showing all sorts of love to the one and only Peter Parker. Now, it wasn't Peter's goal to receive a bunch of love and adoration, but he definitely appreciates what he means to his city as a superhero and as a football player. But the job for Syracuse is still nowhere near done yet, because they have to find a way to keep their win streak alive heading on the road against Louisville. Now Syracuse started this game out with great field position, and Peter was trying to take advantage of it by snagging his ball at the air with one hand. This was enough to have his team hyped up all throughout this game, because by the end of the first half, tied at 7, Peter would come up with a touchdown that puts his team back on top. But despite Peter playing well so far, it was not that good of a game as he usually has. So he knew that when he got another opportunity, he would have to break off this tackle. Oh yeah, there's nobody gonna catch him. He's getting to the end zone for his second score of the day that puts his team up by 2 possessions before Louisville would eventually take the lead by the 4th quarter. Thankfully though, Louisville does not have Peter Parker, because with less than 20 seconds left in this game when they needed it most, Peter came up with a touchdown for Syracuse, putting them ahead in this game in the final moments and doing enough to secure them another win on the season. And at this point, y'all, this team seems completely unstoppable. It was almost quite literally impossible to guard Peter, as he was just pretty much able to catch anything on the field. But when he was off the field, he was also able to make an impact as well. Because sometimes Peter would have to really come out here and knock some sense into people by saying, "Wang." Oh yeah, Peter not playing around with these boys, man. He just got the suit. He ain't letting nobody touch it. He was out here teaching these boys a lesson, and he was using that Tony Stark technology to do so. He was still looking forward to one day becoming an official member of the Avengers, but that could wait for now as he was super focused on finishing off the season strong for Syracuse. They potentially have a chance to get themselves in the college football playoffs. But it all continues here as they lock in for their next game on the road against UConn. Now this was another game where early on Peter wanted to set the tone for his team. So that's why as soon as he got the opportunity to, he was gonna break off some tackles, and Peter Parker was gone. He was outrunning this entire UConn squad for a touchdown to set the tone for his team. But even Peter didn't realize that he was only just getting started, because the next opportunity Peter had to make some plays, he would get himself open over the top and come up with a catch before breaking off a couple more tackles, and he was gone again. Peter is heading back to the end zone for another touchdown to put his team up by 14. But if you thought Peter was done right there, then yeah, buddy, you're crazy, because the very next drive, Peter was coming up with another big play. It was on his way to the end zone for his 3rd touchdown. And at this point, he understands that he's playing against UConn, but he still can't believe that he's really doing it like this. Especially when there is literally less than 10 seconds left in the half, so Syracuse decided to take a shot deep to Peter, which he caught. And somehow he was able to get past the defense for another touchdown. Peter Parker is going absolutely crazy in this game. He has 300 yards, and it's not even the end of the first half. And by the time the second half did come, for some reason UConn thought it was a good idea to press Peter Parker, and he was easily getting by this defender for another big play. Man, what is going on? I'm trying to see who this number 12 guy is who's defending Peter, because this is great, but we can't even see it. Either way, it seems pretty obvious that it's not a good idea for him to be pressing up on Peter, but his coach puts him in another bad position, and Peter Parker was coming up with another catch at the end of the 3rd quarter that gets him across the goal line for a touchdown. This is insane. Syracuse has over 40 points and Peter Parker has over 400 yards by the end of the 3rd quarter, doing way more than enough to give his team a blowout victory on the road. And despite the fact that Peter was out here breaking records and was obviously the reason why they win, he was giving a lot of credit to his team and the media like a true leader would. Peter had his team in great position at the end of the year because of plays like this one. He was an absolute freak of nature, and it seems like whenever it mattered most, he was coming up with big plays like he was here against Georgia Tech, bringing his team into scoring range in the final moments of the game, and after he comes out, they somehow score a touchdown to pull off the W. Syracuse's success would continue into a game against Florida State where Peter came up with a catch for a touchdown that put him over 100 yards before half, all while helping his team move to 10-1 on the season heading into his final game of the year. But just because the Orange was now a top 10 team in the country, it did not mean that Peter could abandon his responsibilities as Spider-Man. And it turns out that one of his good friends, Miles Morales, was also playing college football as well, and he even got a suit to match his new team's colors too. But now heading into the final game of the regular season, Peter was ready to lock in and try and help his team finish the year 11-1. But the only thing stopping them from doing so is a fellow ACC opponent, Boston College. Now Boston College was playing off coverage hoping that Peter wouldn't beat them over the top, but instead he just caught the slant before breaking off some tackles, and just like that Peter looked like he was out of there. But then I don't know who this dude number 2 is, but he was a lot faster than Peter thought, and he ends up tracking him down from behind. Either way, he had set his team up with a chance to score some points, and they did after they are now up 14-7 in the second half. Bringing us to the 3rd quarter where Peter wanted to keep the momentum going for his team by saying "excuse me" and coming up with a play that brings his team well into scoring range. He had them on a drive that took up a bunch of clock in the 4th quarter, and after they got down to the goal line and allowed the running back to get across for a touchdown, Syracuse had done enough to finish off one of their best regular seasons in program history. The Orange finish off the season 11-1, and heading into the postseason, they are now actually the third-ranked team in the country, and it looks like they're going to have a bye week for the college football playoffs. This really could not have been a better year for Peter, as he improved greatly on his own performance, going for over 2,500 yards on the year and earning himself another Heisman trophy, becoming the only player since Archie Griffin in 1975 to ever do so. At this point, Peter is easily considered to be the greatest receiver of all time. But unfortunately, he might have to become one of the greatest superheroes of all time if he wants to stop what's happening next. Because it turns out that Harry would be consumed by the same symbiote that got Peter last season. And he looked like he was about to cause some serious danger to the city, man, so Peter had to stop him. But oh no, Harry had become a monster named Venom, and he was taking over the entire city with the symbiote. Yeah guys, this is definitely not good, and Peter's gonna have to take care of this. But it's gonna have to wait because he has a playoff football game, baby. The Syracuse Orange are heading into their first ever matchup in the college football playoffs, and for a chance to move on to the next round, they will have to take down the Clemson Tigers. Now early on against one of the best teams in the ACC. Peter was doing a great job making a play on his first reception before getting downfield and saying, hey, moving his team across the 50. Now this drive would actually end up resulting in an interception, but with Clemson not doing anything with the ball, Syracuse would find themselves right back in the same spot, leading to a 3rd down and 10 where Peter came up with the catch over the middle for a touchdown. He's putting up the first points of the game in the playoffs, and it looks like the Orange have all the momentum before Clemson would take the lead in the second half, bringing us to a 1st and 10 where Peter ran a motion across the field, and after cutting up, he was able to get himself open, and he was coming up with a catch that brings his team well into scoring range. And it would only be a few plays later where Peter would cap off this drive with a touchdown. He helped his team regain the lead before Clemson would take it right back. And now Syracuse is in a tough position as they have to come up with a play to get them in scoring range, but this was definitely not doing the job. But Peter knew that with his team relying on him, he had to make something happen. So after Clemson left him booty butt cheeks wide open, Peter was out here coming up with a catch, and he was outrunning this safety for a touchdown. Peter Parker helped Syracuse take the lead in the final minute of this game, scoring some points at the end of this one that helps the Orange get to the next round of the playoffs. Peter Parker comes up clutch in the final moments to help his team move on. They were headed to the next round of the playoffs, and the crazy thing about it is that there was actually 5 ACC teams that made the playoffs. I didn't even notice that. But something that Peter noticed was that he now had a chance to help his team get to the national championship. The only thing is that they were about to play in the toughest game that they've had all season. And for the right to compete for a championship, they will have to take down the number 2 team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs. Now this game started out great for Syracuse because they somehow came up with a touchdown, and they already had the lead before the offense took the field. But early on, it seemed like it might be a little bit of a rough day for Georgia as they were allowing Peter Parker to come up with some crazy plays. Somehow he catches his pass off the tip and picks up a 1st down, bringing us to the second quarter where Peter is in the slot and he realizes that the guy who's guarding him is definitely a mismatch. He just glides right past him for an easy touchdown to put Syracuse up by multiple possessions. And all of a sudden, Syracuse has a bunch of momentum in this game after getting the ball back up still by 2 scores, and they had a nice opportunity to add to the lead after Peter gets wide open, and he is coming up with a catch with nobody around him as he dives across the goal line for a score. Peter Parker is getting it done in the first half against Georgia, helping his team take a 3-score lead before Georgia would cut it down to just 1 possession in the 3rd quarter. But just because Georgia's offense came alive, it does not mean their defense is doing any better. They keep leaving Peter Parker wide open, and he's making the Bulldogs pay as he gets them down to the goal line, and on the 2nd down, he comes up with another score, making a play that puts the Orange back up by 2 possessions in the second half, and it turns out that this was already enough to send them to the national championship. The Syracuse Orange were going somewhere that they've never been in their school history. And soon, it would be time for Peter Parker to lock in for the final game of the year. He had already won 2 Heismans for his Uncle Ben, but now he has the chance to do something even greater. He's going to do everything he can to help his team make history, as in the national championship, they will be set to face off against the Michigan Wolverines. Now, I'm not going to lie, early on in this game, Michigan was clamping up Peter Parker, and Syracuse was lucky that this wasn't picked off. By the second quarter, Syracuse was down a possession, and Peter only had 1 catch for 7 yards. So they tried to take a shot deep to him to get him going, but that did not work out. Eventually, Peter would start getting involved in this game as he came up with a catch that brought his team into scoring range, bringing us to a 1st and goal where the Orange have a chance to tie this game up, and they do after Peter catches a touchdown. This one is tied up at 7 apiece before Michigan takes the lead back before half. And with this team not wanting to fall too far behind in this game, they needed somebody to make a play, and this receiver was the one to do it. He breaks off a tackle before getting completely open, and he is just racing his way towards the end zone for a score. Unfortunately, the field goal kicker would actually miss the kick, and Syracuse was down by 1 point after halftime. But thanks to Peter Parker, who was doing a great job manipulating this defense and getting open in the zones, he had them back across midfield, bringing us to a play where Peter's spidey senses were tingling, and he felt like he had a chance to make something happen. Because with this defense giving him cushion, he had room to come up with a catch before breaking off a tackle, and now he's in a foot race with the safety and beats him to the end zone for a touchdown. Peter Parker was coming up with an incredible play that puts his team back up in the national championship. Bringing us here to the fourth quarter where Michigan was only able to score 3. And with them only having 1 timeout, Syracuse is trying their best to keep the clock moving, and they're doing a great job of doing so as they move this game to under 2 minutes. Eventually getting to a situation where all they need is just 1 more first down, and Peter gets him to a 3rd and inches. This could be the game right here. But instead of giving it to Peter Parker, they're going to give it to their star running back, who reaches across for a first down. Syracuse moves the chains with the #1 team in the country having no timeouts, and the Orange have done enough to earn themselves their first ever national championship. The Syracuse Orange are winning a championship for the first time in program history. They had dominated bad teams all year and proved that they belong against the best ones. And thanks to Peter Parker, who is most likely now the greatest receiver in the history of college football, they are on top of the college football world. But unfortunately, it looks like there might be no world to be on top of if Peter doesn't find a way to stop Venom. He is out here trying to destroy everything right now. I mean, he's even ripping apart the Midtown High football field. Hey, come on, Harry, this is where Peter earned his scholarships. Oh yeah, Peter was pretty mad about this, so he busted out some technology that Tony Stark gave him, and he started hitting Venom with that mwang, 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 mwang. Eventually, though, Peter realized that there was only going to be one way to stop Venom, and Harry had realized it too. So when the right time came, Peter knew that he had to stop Harry's heart, and although this would save the entire world, unfortunately this resulted in Peter having to end the life of his best friend. But everything was all good though when Miles would shock him back to life. So now Peter would be able to keep his best friend, protect this city, and be the winner of a national championship. Peter Parker had the greatest season in the history of college football. 165 receptions, over 3,000 yards, and 37 touchdowns. He went on to break multiple national season, game, and career records, easily establishing himself as one of, if not the greatest college football player of all time, after only playing for just 2 years. And although he had actually already accomplished what his Uncle Ben wanted him to, Peter still felt like he wanted more out of his football career. So he is thinking about potentially transferring to another school, running it back with Syracuse, or potentially taking the next year off to prepare for the NFL draft. Which brings us to today, where for Peter Parker's junior season, well, there wasn't going to be one. He decided to take a year off to lock in on becoming a better Spider-Man because he wanted to be better at protecting this city. So all summer, he and his partner Miles Morales, well, they were both doing a great job at being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Now at this point, Peter is preparing to head to the NFL draft, and the entire state of New York was showing a lot of love, because soon it would officially be time for Peter Parker to take his talents to the league. He had an incredible college career where within only 2 seasons, he went for 50 yards shy of 6,000 receiving yards. Spider-Man was an absolute dog in college as he was mostly compared to Justin Jefferson. But now it is time for Peter to get some work done at the NFL Combine, where he came out here and ran a 4.31, showing just how fast he can really be. Overall, he had a great combine, and a 2-time Heisman winner was considered to be a mid-first rounder. A lot of teams were skeptical of him after he took a year off, but there would be a franchise that would take him soon. Because now it is time for the NFL draft, where Peter would only have to wait a little bit before he would eventually be drafted by the New York Giants. Peter Parker was staying in New York. His Uncle Ben's favorite team was the New York Giants, and now he had a chance to play for them and potentially win them a Super Bowl. And now that Peter Parker is officially a member of the Giants, he cannot wait to lock in and get to practice, even though the Giants will not have their starting quarterback. Apparently he's off taking care of some family stuff right now, so Peter's just out here preparing for his NFL debut. Cause he is finally gonna get some action here in the preseason with the Giants facing off against the Buffalo Bills. Now on his very first play, Peter was already proving that he could get open. The 2-time Heisman winner was already having a great day and was making the case that he might be the new #1 in New York. Cause Peter Parker next to Malik Neighbors looked like that could be a problem for opposing defenses. And it definitely was for the Bills as Peter comes up with his first touchdown of his NFL career. And although it is just the preseason, Peter is still looking good for the Giants. He was out here letting the coaches know that he's ready to do whatever it takes to be the best. So things are looking good for Peter, but unfortunately they are not looking good for the Osborne family. Because it turns out that Harry is in a coma, and his dad Norman was trying to find ways to keep him alive. So Peter was definitely hoping the best for his friend, but soon it was time for him to lock in for his second preseason game, where in this one against the New York Jets, Peter was making plays all over. Halfway through the second quarter, he already had 56 yards, eventually getting his 5th reception that put his team down in goal-to-goal territory. And by the end of the first half, Peter was well over 100 yards and had gone for his 2nd touchdown of the preseason. Peter Parker was putting in that work. He was showing just how great of a player he could be, but unfortunately he would still be stuck as the backup. Peter really had no problem with it because he knew just how great Malik Neighbors was, so he just got back to working hard at practice so he can prepare for his final game of the preseason, where Peter will play a little bit into the first quarter against the New England Patriots. Now Peter was out here early on a 3rd down and helped his team move the chains. He was actually making a huge play for the Giants that completely flipped the field and brought them into scoring territory. Peter's not even in the regular season yet, and he's already feeling comfortable about his place in this offense. He knew that anytime he had a chance to, he could always make a play by saying "Wang" and snag a reception at the air with one hand. Oh yeah, the Giants had definitely seen enough, and they were ready to move on to the regular season, where although Peter Parker was still not going to be the starter, he would technically be like 1B behind Malik Neighbors. And hey man, that's cool for Peter. He already has enough in his hands as he was out here trying to defend this city, and he was still trying to find ways to get around faster and keep as many people as safe as possible. Eventually, Peter was ready to swing into his first game of the regular season, where it looks like Peter is not making his debut until the second half, but he has the chance to help his team come out with a W against the Washington Commanders. Now, it was not long after entering this game where Peter would make an impact. It turns out that the starting quarterback is still not back from dealing with family issues, so Peter and Jackson Dart now are working to move downfield. And I'll tell you guys what, man, Peter is extremely unselfish, because he was working just as hard to get himself open as he was to make an incredible block that sprung Malik Neighbors free down the sideline as he crossed over the goal line for a touchdown. The New York Giants take the lead over a division rival in the second half, which turned out to be huge as they got to the end of the 4th quarter, because with the help of Peter Parker, who was continuing to move the sticks, they would get right back down in the red zone. We're on 1st and 10, Peter was running a corner to the end zone before he snagged his ball at the air with one hand. Peter Parker officially comes up with his first touchdown of his NFL career. And this score to put his team up by multiple possessions turned out to be enough to put this game away. The New York Giants start the year off 1-0, and they are led by their rookie receiver, as Peter went for over 100 yards and a touchdown in his debut. But as great as this was, it would only get even better, because it turns out that for the first time since Peter became a New York Giant, he would finally get to meet his starting quarterback, Clark Kent, who was now heading into his 4th year in the NFL after returning from a mission on another planet. So after letting the sun give him some energy for a little bit, he was finally ready to head to practice. And in his first day meeting Peter, they both had an outstanding connection. It seems like Clark was just completely comfortable throwing to Peter, and by the end of the week, they both seemed like they were ready to head into their next game, where they will be on the road facing off against another division rival, as now the Giants are going to try to move to 2-0 against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, it did not take long into this game for Clark Kent to target Peter Parker downfield. They were coming up with some big completions on this opening possession, but some miscommunication led to a pick. Luckily, Dallas wasn't able to do anything with it, and Peter was right back to catching passes between the numbers, coming up with a huge play, but unfortunately this drive would end with another pick. Clark is definitely targeting Peter Parker a lot, but he wasn't going to stop there as he found him deep over the top. Peter comes up with the catch before he's able to outrun his defender to the end zone, coming up with a touchdown that begins to bring his team back in this one in the second half. This is also the first touchdown between Clark Kent and Peter Parker, but it seems like this might only just be the beginning, because Peter was finding himself wide open over the top before he came up with another catch that brought his team deep in enemy territory. He helped the Giants get the first goal before Clark Kent decided that he was just going to take this one himself, and he ran in the end zone for a touchdown, finally tying this game up at 17, but they knew they could not stop there. Peter knew his team had to come away with another touchdown, so he decided to blow right by this defender, and even though he was being double teamed, he would still come up with the catch. Peter Parker was heading to the end zone for his second touchdown of the game, finally giving the Giants the lead over the Cowboys, but Peter knows that his Uncle Ben absolutely hated the Cowboys. So he came out here later on in the 4th quarter and ended up catching another bomb. Clark Kent to Peter Parker was already becoming a problem for NFL defenses, as Peter ended up breaking the single game record for receiving yards and helped his team move to 2-0. Peter Parker helped the Giants make the comeback and win this game 31-24. And in the process, he had one of, if not the greatest game in NFL history for a receiver, putting up 362 yards, which absolutely could not have been done without his quarterback, Clark Kent. But after Peter wins his first Offensive Player of the Week, he cannot wait to keep it going against one of the best teams in the league, as the Giants will be at home heading into one of the most anticipated matchups of the season, with New York facing off against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, it turns out that the Giants defense would put up a score early on, and it wouldn't be till the end of the second quarter where Peter would finally start getting things going, as he connected with his quarterback on a reception that brought the team inside goal-to-goal territory. Where on the very next play, Clark knew that Peter would eventually get open before finding him in the end zone. They come up with a touchdown here in the first half to go up by 14 on the Chiefs, bringing us here to the third quarter where the Chiefs are beginning to come back. So Clark realizes that he might have to give his new young wide receiver a chance, and Peter Parker comes up with the catch. The New York Giants were making play after play on this Chiefs defense, and it wouldn't stop here on this drive as Clark ends up finding his tight end for a touchdown. The New York Giants go back up by 2 possessions in the second half and officially do enough to move to 3-0 on the year. The New York Giants are looking like one of the top teams in the league, and they can definitely thank their young wide receivers Malik Neighbors and Peter Parker. They both had a great game today on the field, but Peter was having an even greater day off it, because Spider-Man was out here saving people. Somebody had actually decided to send an attack helicopter after him, but Spider-Man had no problem taking it down. But he was also hoping that he wouldn't have any problems heading into his next game, because led by Clark Kent, they will be heading into another game at home, facing off against one of the best teams in the AFC West, the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers came out here with a 7-0 lead, but as soon as the Giants got on offense, this Clark to Peter Parker connection would get to work. They were already making some nice plays on his opening possession, but Clark had a feeling that he might be able to take advantage of this defense over the top, as Peter Parker would end up catching this ball in the end zone. Superman throws a bomb to Spider-Man to tie this game up at 7. And this turned out to be a huge play that really set the tone for the team going forward, because on the following drive, Clark Kent decided that he was going to take over. He scrambled out of the pocket for a 13-yard rushing touchdown that put his team up by 7, and then came out here in the second quarter already up by 2 possessions, and he scrambled up the middle for another score. But this was really only the beginning for this offense, as Peter Parker would end up getting wide open for another touchdown. And from there, the floodgates were completely open as Clark just continued to target Peter for another score. This duo was laying belt to cheeks on the Chargers. They ended up connecting for their 4th touchdown of the game, and by then they had done way more than enough to keep them undefeated on the year. The Giants go on to eviscerate the Chargers 49-10, mostly thanks to a 7-touchdown performance from the quarterback and an almost 200-yard and 4-touchdown performance from their rookie receiver. These two were being talked about pretty much all week. And there were a lot of people who thought that they could challenge Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, or Matt Stafford to Cooper Kupp that one year as one of the greatest quarterback to wide receiver duos in NFL history. These two were dominating the league as they were both leaders in their respective positions, but people still could not comprehend just how great this team could be. And going forward throughout the season against some of the weaker teams in the league, Clark Kent and Peter Parker were looking to reach their max potential, starting here in their next matchup against the New Orleans Saints. Now, this Giants offense was moving on its opening drive, and eventually it would be capped off with Clark Kent rushing to the end zone for a score, putting the Giants up by 7 and already bringing the momentum towards their way. Because on the next drive, Peter would come up with a catch on a drag route over the middle before he decided to say, hey, breaking himself loose, and out of nowhere, Peter had a wide open lane towards the end zone. The Giants were up multiple possessions on the 0-4 New Orleans Saints, and it turns out they've already done enough to come up with another win on the year. New York was rolling. And at this point, Peter Parker had officially become the wide receiver 1, as they were beginning to design the game plan around him in the passing game. And you would definitely see a lot of that heading into the next game against the Eagles, where Clark Kent was out here continuously finding Peter Parker. And Peter was making the most of his opportunities, as on this one, he was taking this one the distance for a touchdown. The New York Giants adding Peter Parker to the team would take this offense to a completely different level, especially since Clark Kent had come back to take over for the QB1 spot. But it wasn't just them out there making plays, man, because I'm telling you, Malik Neighbors was a problem. He and Peter Parker were already being recognized as easily the best receiver duo in the league. And Malik Neighbors would continue to show his value against the Eagles as he came up with his 2nd touchdown of the day to help move the Giants to 6-0 on the year. They take down the Eagles 21-10, and at this point, Peter Parker is feeling great about his season. But it's too bad that Norman Osborn cannot say the same about his son. He is pissed off that his son has still not gotten better, and at this point, he has decided to take some drastic measures.
Get the G serum ready ASAP.
Now it turns out that Norman Osborn is about to take the G serum again. He's taken some before, but not at the level that he's about to. So we're going to have to see how that goes for him later on after Peter plays in his next game, which will be on the road against another team from the AFC West, as the Giants are set to face off against the Denver Broncos. Now this is another game where early on, Peter Parker is looking to make a play. So he was out here flying past this man off the line of scrimmage and getting himself open before snagging this ball with one hand. Peter Parker makes the one-handed catch for a touchdown. He didn't even have to do all that, man. He just wanted to be different. That's crazy. Either way, this play was the catalyst for the Giants offense to be on fire all day, bringing us to the fourth quarter where Clark Kent was finding Theo Johnson for a touchdown, putting the team up by 3 possessions and allowing them to come up with another W on the year. The New York Giants were just crushing teams so far this year, and they felt great about their chance to eventually make the playoffs as they were now 7-0, and Peter Parker as of this week was on pace for a historical season. Pretty much the entire state of New York was elated about this young rookie receiver. Well, except for one person. Because Norman Osborn didn't give a damn about anything other than saving his son. So he knew it was time for him to try this goblin serum that didn't look like it was working. And unfortunately, Norman Osborn would go crazy. But that's something Peter hasn't even found out about yet because he has been too locked in on this season. He's trying to keep his team undefeated against a division rival as they travel on the road to face off against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now the Giants were down for a while against Philadelphia, and it would take all the way until the second quarter for a Peter Parker touchdown to take the lead. And from there it seemed like they never looked back. Because on the first play of the second half, Clark decided to take a shot downfield to Peter, and he ended up making the catch for the touchdown. This Eagle secondary could not guard Peter Parker, as he just committed some white-on-white crime against Cooper DeJean. But Philly decided that they were going to put a brother out there to try and guard him too. But even when he was double-teamed, Peter would still come up with an incredible play. This man just snagged that ball out the air with one hand while he was double-teamed. Oh nah, Peter Parker different. And he's one of the main reasons why the Giants were moving up to 8-0. They would stay undefeated on the season, and it would be another game where both he and Malik Neighbors came out here and did their thing. And so did Clark Kent, as he went on to win Offensive Player of the Week. Clark at this point was actually told to focus on getting as many passing touchdowns as he can throughout the rest of the year. And he had a specific goal that he was trying to reach, but one of Peter's main goals was keeping this city safe. Because it turns out that Norman Osborn would turn into the Green Goblin. And he was looking real scary, y'all. He see one police officer and he said, "Get off." Oh nah, Peter had to stop this. But he was gonna have to wait a little while in order to do it. Because as of now, Peter is heading into one of the biggest games of the season against a top team in the NFC. They will be at home for a chance to go 9-0 against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, early on, the communication between Clark and Peter was not good. Clark was throwing an interception that luckily was not taken to the crib. But luckily, it turns out that Clark was not too fazed by the turnover, as he would take another shot downfield to Peter, who said, "Wang." Oh my, yo, Peter comes up with one of his greatest plays of his career. He snagged this ball out the air with one hand and sent this dude to the dirt on his way for a touchdown. Peter Parker just did this Niners defense so crazy that they decided it wasn't worth guarding him anymore. And they just allowed Peter to score a touchdown later on that helped the New York Giants move to 9-0 on the season. We are looking at one of the greatest seasons in Giant history at this point. There was really nothing defenses can do to stop the playmakers that the Giants had, including Peter Parker, who was getting a lot of recognition throughout the city. Spider-Man was happy that he was beginning to establish himself as one of the best players in the league, but he also knew he had to continue to establish himself as one of the best superheroes in the world. He had been absolutely locked in as Spider-Man lately, and he was making sure that nobody was getting hurt except this dude who definitely had a broken back. But moving forward throughout the season, the Giants feel like they might have a chance to go undefeated. So they're going to try to do exactly that, continuing in their next game against the Chicago Bears. Now on New York's opening drive, they were struggling a little bit, but Malik Neighbors would keep it alive with a first down. And although this drive would extend into the second quarter, it would unfortunately end with a pick, as the Bears come up with an interception and would eventually take a 10-point lead. But you know what, man, the Giants knew that they could not fall too far behind. So Clark decided to take a shot downfield to Peter, and this ball would hang up in the air for what seemed like forever until Peter came up with a reception. Spider-Man comes up with a touchdown that brings his team back within a possession, and they would find themselves in a little bit of a shootout throughout this game. Because in the fourth quarter, on 4th down and inches, they would score a touchdown that ties this game up at 24, bringing us to the very end of the game where New York had no timeouts, and down by 3, they had to find a way to get in at least field goal range. But since this throw was going to the end zone, Peter figured he might as well make a play, but he couldn't. The Bears pick off this pass in the final moments of the game, and the New York Giants were taking their first loss of the year. This was another solid game from Peter Parker and Malik Neighbors, who both went for over 100 yards. But it was definitely a tough one for Clark Kent. He wasn't the only one having a rough time at the moment though, as it turns out that Norman Osborn had no idea that he was taken over by the Goblin Serum. He full on had two personalities at this point, but we'll come back to this later. Because after taking their first loss of the year, the Giants are now going to try and bounce back. And they're looking at a great opportunity to do so in their next game against the Green Bay Packers. Now Clark had decided that whenever Peter was being covered one-on-one, he was going to try and take a shot downfield to him no matter what. And Peter Parker was not disappointing him in this game. The New York Giants would find themselves in another tight game as this score helps them take the lead. But by the end of the fourth quarter, they would be tied at 24, where unfortunately Clark was again struggling with interceptions. He throws a pick in the final moments of the game that would ultimately result with the Giants taking their second straight loss. Something was going on with Clark Kent and Peter had no idea what it was. They were both still having a great season, but Peter really wanted to get the 1 seed, and he knew the more losses they take, the less likely that would be. So Peter was trying to stay locked in and get things back going against the Detroit Lions. But by the end of this game, they would find themselves in another bad position, and another Clark Kent interception would turn out to give the Giants their third straight loss on the year. The New York Giants went from looking like one of the best teams in the league to now looking like the worst team in all of football. And at this point, Peter just wanted to understand what the hell was going on with his quarterback. So he decided to sit down and talk to Clark Kent, which is where Clark would finally tell Peter that he knows that he is Spider-Man, and he would admit to Peter that he is Superman. And he has been dealing with some crazy stuff lately, so his game's been a little off. And at this point, Peter truly does understand, and he knows that he's going to have to step up and help Clark carry this team. They have a chance to finish out this regular season and potentially get the 1 seed, but they have to get back on track here against the New England Patriots. Now, for one of the first times all season, the Giants would find themselves in a low-scoring game, because it would be to the end of the second quarter where they would finally score a touchdown, putting up points that would help them take the lead, but it would end up tied at the end of the game, where with less than 2 minutes left, the Giants were driving. They would get themselves all the way down to the goal line where Clark would find a man in the end zone for a touchdown. Clark throws a touchdown in the final moments of this game to get the Giants to 10 wins on the season. This is actually a game where Malik Neighbors was putting in most of the work, but that was fine with Peter because the next week they were making it a point to get him the ball. They were in an extremely tight race for the 1 seed. So they would come out here against the Minnesota Vikings, and even though Peter was wide open, they would still score a touchdown. They took a 2-possession lead here at the top of the fourth quarter, but by the end of it, with Minnesota beginning to come back, they knew they had to get the ball to Peter, who was coming up with a play to push the team in enemy territory and help them come up with another big-time win. The New York Giants looked like they were back on track to potentially take that 1 seed, as they were one of the only 2 teams in the NFC that had already clinched their division. All they had to do now was just take care of business against the Las Vegas Raiders, and this turned out to be a game where they decided to get the ball to Peter throughout the entire day. No matter what kind of coverage the Raiders were playing against Peter Parker, they had absolutely no answers. He was absolutely frying these defenders all throughout the first half, and it continued into the second, because by the fourth quarter, Peter was coming up with his 3rd touchdown of the day. He helped give the Giants an insurmountable lead and ultimately move them to 13-3 on the season. Peter Parker would ultimately go for over 200 yards and 4 touchdowns, absolutely dominating in this one, and he was liking that he and his quarterback were getting a ton of respect for being one of the top duos in the league. But at this point, Peter and Clark are sitting out this final week because they have already clinched a bye week. So they actually have some time to take a look at their final season stats, where Clark went for over 4,500 passing yards, 53 touchdowns to 30 interceptions. That's crazy. I mean, it's all good. He did say he was having a little bit of a rough time, but Peter Parker definitely wasn't. He went for over 2,300 receiving yards and 26 touchdowns, having one of the greatest seasons in the history of the league, while Malik Neighbors also went for over 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns himself. These 3 were the exact reason why the Giants were heading to the NFL playoffs, where now they would get an opportunity to move on to the NFC Championship if they can make it past the divisional round against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, ever since Peter found out that Clark was Superman, their connection got even stronger. And at the same time, it seemed like it made Clark play a little bit better too, because he was taking a lot more chances as he was scrambling out of the pocket for a rushing touchdown. He had the Giants finally on the board in this one, and he knew he had to keep this going in the second quarter, because on the next drive, Clark would rip this ball to the seam to Peter Parker, and they would begin a drive that led to the red zone, where on 2nd down and 6, Peter was getting open to the outside and coming up with a catch before diving across the goal line for a touchdown. They make a nice play before the end of the first half, but unfortunately this game would end up going into overtime. Well, luckily at this point, all the Giants had to do was just get into field goal range. So Clark had decided to throw a dime down the sideline to Peter. They take advantage of a Philadelphia turnover as they are already into scoring range, and it looks like Clark Kent and Peter Parker would get the Giants to the NFC Championship. They take down the Eagles 17-14, and it seems like the entire state of New York is happy, but it turns out that the Green Goblin is actually a Philadelphia Eagles fan, so he decided to scare Peter Parker and punch him in the face for knocking him out the playoffs. But you know what, man, it was worth it, because the Giants are one game away from making the Super Bowl, and they would have a great chance to reach it as they now have home field advantage, and the only team in their way was the Detroit Lions. Now this one was definitely a defensive battle all throughout the first half, as although Peter was coming up with some nice plays, the Giants only managed to score a couple field goals in the first 2 quarters. It wouldn't be until the second half where Clark would find the tight end over the middle, and after this offense gets a couple great blocks downfield, this tight end is free down the sideline. He is outrunning this Detroit defense all the way to the end zone, as the Giants come up with the touchdown to give them a 2-possession lead in the second half. The Giants are looking like they are in excellent position, and it gets even better as they come up with a turnover, and they're looking to take advantage by getting Peter Parker open for a touchdown. The New York Giants had a commanding 2-possession lead by the end of the 4th quarter. And at this point, Peter's spidey senses are going crazy because he knows that he has a chance to make a play. He knows that one more first down would help win this game, so Clark decides to rip the ball to Peter, and he comes up with a catch to move the chains for his team, and just like that, the New York Giants are headed to the Super Bowl. They take down the Lions in a game where Clark Kent played amazing. But he knows he couldn't have done it without his tight end and rookie receiver, who both went for over 100 yards. And at this point, Peter was actually playing so well that the coaches had decided that they want to get him a gift, because they want him to know that they appreciate him. And I can't say that I blame him, considering that Peter was actually an MVP candidate. Clark Kent was also in the race to win MVP, but Peter was doing this as a rookie. He would go on to win Offensive Player of the Year though, running away with an award that Malik Neighbors was also in contention for too. And on top of that, I would actually find out that the Giants had the best defensive player in the league. I had no idea that Bobby Okereke went crazy like this. He won Defensive Player of the Year. So at this point, the Giants had rightfully so established themselves as one of the top teams in the NFL. They literally have more talent than most people realize, and they would have one more chance to show it off as they were heading into the Super Bowl, where they were about to try and take home the Lombardi Trophy against the Baltimore Ravens. Now the Giants would actually get this game started off terrible. Clark Kent would throw an interception that was returned to the crib for 6, putting the Giants down 14 early on, and they already had to climb out of a hole. But if there was anybody who could do so, New York had 2 players that could definitely get that done, as Clark Kent would find Peter Parker downfield. He comes up with a catch before bringing his team to the end zone, and the Giants put up their first score of the day. Peter Parker had this stadium rocking, and this was exactly the momentum that the New York Giants needed. Because by the end of the second quarter, Clark knew that no matter who was guarding Peter, it was going to be a mismatch. And that definitely showed as the Giants got down to the goal line before Clark would find Malik Neighbors in the end zone. The Giants come up with a touchdown to tie this game up before half, but Baltimore would eventually take the lead back by 3. Unfortunately for the Ravens though, they were having some real issues playing against Spiderman. And it wasn't even about the fact that they could absolutely not guard him. But Peter Parker was also out here coming up with some incredible blocks. He had helped his running back come up with a 20-yard rushing touchdown. A huge play in this game that Clark Kent knew would help the Giants take control of this game. Because by the end of the 4th quarter, with the Giants still having the lead, we are now at the point where Baltimore is starting to take some timeouts. But unfortunately, the Giants were pushed to a 3rd down and 9. They had to find a way to make a play, but Clark knew the only person he could trust was Peter Parker. So Superman decided to launch this ball up to Spider-Man, and he comes up with a catch. Peter Parker makes a play. He helps his team get down inside goal-to-goal territory, where just a couple plays later, Clark would find his tight end in the end zone for a touchdown. The New York Giants are going up by 2 possessions in the 4th quarter, and with the help of their quarterback Clark Kent and their young superstar wide receiver Peter Parker, the New York Giants are officially Super Bowl champions. Clark Kent would continue to establish himself as one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. And at the same time, Peter Parker would continue to establish a legacy in memory of his Uncle Ben. These two were on the tippity top of the football world. And it was mostly because of them that the New York Giants were able to hold up another Super Bowl trophy. Clark Kent and Peter Parker were pretty much locked in all game, as Peter had 241 yards of Clark Kent's 294 passing yards. Peter would become the first rookie ever to win Super Bowl MVP, as he also helped the Giants win their 5th Super Bowl title.